The alarms scream through the office, louder than any conference call. A sudden surge of chaos rips through the calm as employees look up, wide-eyed at the flashing news alert. The headline on every screen reads, CEO James Morgan under investigation for corporate fraud. James Morgan's stomach lurches. He stands, frozen in disbelief, as the room around him disintegrates into whispers. The phone in his hand slips as his mind races. This can't be happening. Not now. Not like this. Mark Harris steps forward, his face pale. This wasn't supposed to happen. Who's behind this? He asks, his voice shaking with disbelief. James stares at the screen, his grip tightening around the phone. Who leaked this? How could this happen? His voice cracks as he speaks the words, not fully believing them himself. The room goes still. The employees' eyes flicker between their phones, the screens of their computers, and each other. The weight of the moment is palpable, the air thick with panic and confusion. Tell me, James says, voice barely above a whisper, who is doing this to me? The distant hum of the office feels like it's closing in on him, and for a moment he feels utterly alone, betrayed. The silence weighs on him, suffocating. He is not sure who to trust anymore. The meeting room is suffocating. James sits at the head of the long conference table, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but he can't ignore the growing tension in the air. His eyes flick between the faces of his advisors, each one more distant than the last. This is bad, James murmurs, staring at the flashing screens. We've been under investigation, but we still don't know why. I need answers, and I need them now. Mark shifts nervously in his seat. We're working on it. But this doesn't feel like just a leak. There's something bigger happening here. James slams his fist on the table, his patience thinning. Bigger? What do you mean by bigger? Someone is playing us. This isn't just bad luck. Sarah Mitchell leans forward, her expression full of concern. James, this could be an inside job. Someone in this room may be feeding information to the press. The room goes silent. A chilling thought creeps into James' mind. What if the person who's been closest to him is the one turning against him? Who? James asks, voice tight with the sudden fear creeping up his throat. No one answers. The silence hangs heavy, making James feel like he's sinking deeper with every passing second. The door to the conference room swings open, and Rachel Stevens steps in. Her energy is infectious, but her expression is grim. We've got a serious problem, she says, her voice low. There are whispers that someone inside is leaking information. Someone we've trusted. James jumps up from his chair. Leaking? How? Who? Rachel looks around, ensuring no one is overhearing. I'm still trying to get names, but it's bad, James. Whoever it is, they're playing both sides, and we're in the middle of it. James feels the walls close in. His mind races with possibilities. Could it be someone here? Someone I've worked with for years? I need to know who, James says, his voice strained, barely a whisper. The tension in the room is unbearable as Rachel hesitates to speak. The silence hangs like a guillotine, threatening to fall at any moment. Night presses against the glass while the office runs on fumes. James stares at a wall of numbers as if they might confess. The servers hum, a low animal pacing its cage. Sarah enters without knocking and sets a folder down. She says, I traced the first leak to a finance subnet. The word leak lands like ice in water. He asks, internal credentials? And she nods once. The lights buzz, then settle as if they heard. A calendar alert blooms across his screen from an unknown alias. Sarah says, they cloaked the route through 2 shells. He feels the floor tip, just a fraction. Can we prove it? He asks, voice thin. She answers, if we pull this thread, something tears. The alert flashes again and hides. Who invited a ghost into his house? Dawn bruises the sky when the core team gathers. The boardroom smells like hot plastic and coffee gone bitter. James stands at the head and keeps his voice low. He says we own the narrative or it owns us. Mark slides a PR draft across the table. He says, we distance from legacy decisions now. The words feel clean and sharp, too ready. Rachel opens a slim folder and says, I flagged vendor overlap that shouldn't exist. Paper edges whisper as she turns a page. The clock ticks hard enough to count. James feels their eyes measuring him and the storm. He says, we hold, we verify, then we speak. Mark's smile doesn't reach his eyes. A text pings on James' phone from a blocked contact. It reads, you're looking in the wrong room. Which room is about to lock? The office is eerily quiet now. The hum of panic replaced by the distant echoes of hurried footsteps. James is alone in his office, staring at the screen that now feels like a lifeline, yet a trap. The investigation into his company has intensified. His mind races. Where did this all go wrong? The sound of his phone vibrating shatters the silence. It's Mark. We've got something, Mark's voice says, urgent. A lead on who might be behind this. James' heart skips a beat. Finally, a breakthrough? Tell me everything, James demands, his voice harsh. Mark hesitates before speaking again. It's a leak from someone inside the finance team. Possibly someone close to you, James? A chill runs down James' spine. Someone close. He grips the edge of the desk, the weight of betrayal settling in his chest. He knows Mark's not lying. The silence between them is thick now, filled with the unspoken truth. James rubs his temples, fighting the panic rising in his throat. I'll deal with this. Find out who it is. I'll fix this before it's too late. The urgency in his voice barely covers the fear creeping into his thoughts. But it's too late to turn back now. The walls are closing in. Later, James sits in a small cafe outside the office, the noise of the city swirling around him, but he's far from calm. He takes a long sip from his coffee, the bitter taste doing little to clear his mind. Rachel Stevens, the sharp young executive, joins him, sitting across the table with a concerned look. You can't keep doing this, James, running around looking for answers. It's tearing you apart. James looks at her, his eyes filled with the weight of what's to come. I have to, Rachel. I can't let them take everything I've built. He leans forward, his voice lowering. I have no choice now. Rachel studies him for a moment. I get it. But you can't do this alone. We're all in this together. Her voice softens, almost pleading. James shakes his head. No one can help me now. It's too late for that. A quiet moment passes between them, the distant hum of the city blending with the silence at the table. A small, fragile moment of peace before the storm. Rachel doesn't press him further. She just watches him, her eyes full of empathy and something darker. She knows the road ahead is uncertain, but she won't leave his side. James doesn't expect to hear from Richard Langley, his rival in the corporate world. But the phone rings. Morgan, Richard says smoothly, his voice cold and calculated. I hear things aren't going well for you. I suppose I should be worried. James sits upright, a sudden rush of anger flooding his chest. What's it to you, Langley? He spits. Oh, I'm not concerned, James. In fact, I find it fascinating, Richard continues, his tone dripping with mockery. Your empire is crumbling, and yet you're still standing. But for how long? James can feel Richard's smirk through the phone. His words cut deep. I've been in the game longer than you, Richard. Don't forget who built this company from the ground up. Richard laughs, a cold sound that sends a chill down James' spine. I'm not here to remind you of your past, James. I'm just here to watch the downfall. Maybe I'll pick up the pieces when you're finished. The line goes silent, and James slams the phone down, fists clenched. He feels the weight of Richard's presence even without seeing him. This is no longer a game of business. It's a battle for survival. James arrives at Carl West's office, the retired former CEO who had been ousted years ago. Carl looks up from his desk, his face tired, but his eyes sharp. "You're still fighting, huh?" he asks, his voice soft but full of bitterness. James nods, trying to mask the exhaustion he feels. "I don't have much of a choice, Carl. My company is falling apart. I need advice." "What should I do?" Carl leans back in his chair, the weariness in his face telling the story of years of battles lost. "The first thing you need to understand is this. In business is never about the company. It's about survival, and survival comes at a cost." James listens intently, hanging on Carl's every word. "What do you mean?" he asks, his voice urgent. Carl sighs, rubbing his temples. "There are no real allies in this world, James. Just people who want to use you and then toss you aside. When you get to the top, everyone's a potential enemy." The silence that follows feels heavy, like the weight of Carl's words pressing down on James' chest. "I'm trying to avoid that," James says quietly. Carl's gaze softens. "You can't, James. Not anymore." James leaves Carl's office, the words echoing in his mind. Everyone's a potential enemy. The weight of the decision he faces is heavy. He knows what he must do, but the cost of it terrifies him. He returns to the office, the familiar surroundings now feeling alien. He steps into the boardroom, where the usual faces are now a mix of support and doubt. "I've made a decision," James announces, his voice steady. "We're going on the offensive. We're going to take the fight to Langley and everyone else trying to tear us down. No more plain defense." Mark's eyes widen, but there's something darker in them now. Resentment? Fear? "James, are you sure?" he asks, voice trembling. "I'm sure," James replies, his expression hardening. "It's time to stop running." The door slams behind him as he steps out into the storm ahead. There's no turning back now. Morning light softens the boardroom glass, and the city hum feels almost kind. James breathes slower, as if order might return. The screens are quiet. The phones rest. For a moment, his pulse steadies. Rachel enters with a folder and a tight smile. She says, "I found something that helps." Her voice is careful, sweetened at the edges. Mark hovers by the door, nodding too quickly. James feels the calm, but hears a faint whine from the HVAC like a warning. A printer spits a page and startles him. Rachel avoids his eyes when he asks, "What's in there?" Mark answers instead, "Too fast, a path out." Rachel's fingers drum once, then stop. Something about the silence scratches. The room holds its breath, as if waiting to break. They sit closer than usual, the table feeling smaller. James thanks Rachel, and his voice softens. She says, "You don't always have to carry it alone." The words land like a hand on a wound. He lets himself believe just a little. Mark watches, jaw tight, then smiles like it hurts. James admits, "I'm tired of fighting shadows." Rachel nods and whispers, "Then let's turn on the lights." A calm spreads, thin as glass. The air smells of fresh paper and cold coffee. Mark says, "We'll need signatures by noon," and glances at the exit. The printer chirps again and Rachel flinches. James almost laughs at the jump, then doesn't. Beneath the quiet, a note of dread holds the cord. Richard calls in from a private line, voice smooth as glass. He says, "You built an empire on speed, James. I built patience." James answers, "I built trust." Richard laughs softly, and it burns. "Trust is rented," he says. "Control is owned." The room cools, as if the AC answers him. James stares at the city and sees his reflection trapped in the pain. Richard says, "You choose partners who adore your myth." James snaps, I choose loyalty. Loyalty to what? Richard asks. A story about yourself? Silence stretches, taut and thin. James feels the question slide under his armor and stay. He ends the call, but the voice lingers like smoke. Board convenes early. Papers slide like blades. Mark clears his throat and says, for continuity, I'll assume interim control. The words land heavy and cold. James blinks, then laughs once, short and raw. Rachel avoids his eyes, and the room tilts. He says, you? Mark doesn't flinch. For the company, he replies. Sarah stands, voice shaking. This isn't right. Mark's smile is thin. Security enters, silent as rain. James tastes metal at the back of his tongue. Rachel whispers, sign, and you keep your legacy. He hears the lie breathing. He says, whose legacy? The vote is a hammer. The gavel falls in a hush that roars. Silence swallows the corridor. James walks alone, coat over his arm, badge surrendered. The elevator hums like a lullaby for endings. He presses the lobby button and stares at his hands. They look steady. Inside, everything reels. He steps into the rain-scented marble hall and breathes the wet air from the revolving doors. A black car idles outside. The window lowers. Evelyn speaks from the shadows. You mistook kindness for equity. He does not answer. She continues, Mark was efficient. Rachel was necessary. The words slot into place, cruel and clean. He sees it now, the invisible map. He says, thank you. It sounds like a promise. The car pulls away, and he turns toward the storm. Rain hushes the city to a low murmur, and the hotel room holds its breath. James sits by the window as traffic lights smear the glass. The chaos has passed, but the quiet bites deeper. He lays papers across the bed, each a shard of the collapse. The room smells of damp wool and cold coffee. He whispers, it wasn't just a vote. The words feel heavier than the night. Email headers line up like tracks. Timestamps point in one direction. He traces the path through shell firms and friendly funds. A name repeats, soft as an echo. He calls Sarah and asks for the old compliance folders. She says, I kept copies, just in case. He closes his eyes and hears the boardroom gavel again. Under the noise, a slender thread pulls tight. The pattern is there. He knows whose hands tied the knot. He opens Sarah's archive, and the past exhales. The scent of dust and toner drifts up from old binders. He hears a memory of applause in a bright auditorium. Mark once said, we scale now or die later. He remembers the thrill, the nods, the rush to sign. Rachel pitched a vendor with perfect timing. He sees the logo again, too clean, too new. A clause sits like a trap under a ribbon of praise. In his head, the past overlays the present, one voice across both rooms. He says, we invited the wolf in. The wire transfers hum like a low note. Patterns repeat with smug precision. A private equity door opens onto a quiet name. Evelyn steps through the memory and takes a seat he never offered. He reads the first agreement line again. The truth is simple, and it hurts. He signed the key they used to open him. He finds Carl in a quiet bar where ice clicks like metronomes. The room smells of oak and orange peel. James sets the contract down without a word. Carl reads in silence and nods once, slow. You missed the rider, Carl says. James answers, I wanted the when. The confession lands heavy. Air moves in small circles between them. Carl taps a clause with a dull fingernail. Control passes when liquidity is threatened, he says. James hears his own breath counting. He asks, did you ever say no? Carl's eyes hold the answer and the cost. Twice, he says. I kept my name and lost my crown. The bar fades to a tunnel around the paper. James feels the old hunger and the new ache wrestling in his chest. The revelation is not about them. It is about him. He built a door that begged to be kicked in. Evelyn answers his call with a quiet click. The line is clean like a blade. She says, "I prefer daylight for these talks." He stands at the riverwalk where gulls wheel and sirens blur. She arrives with the grace of someone who never hurries. "You were brilliant," she says. "But you confuse velocity with value," he asks. "Why me?" She smiles without warmth. "Because you teach a market," she says. When the myth is loud, the terms can whisper. He says, "You broke it." She replies, "I revealed it." Her words don't shout. They settle. She calls Mark a hinge and Rachel a bridge. "I offered them certainty," she adds. The water slaps the stone in small applause. He feels the ground tilt and then steady. The line between villain and surgeon blurs. The motive is order. The cost is him. The night returns, softer than before. James sits on the hotel floor with the window cracked to the rain. The room holds a new kind of silence. He stacks the contracts in a careful line and breathes until his hands stop shaking. He says, "So, this was the truth all along." The words land and do not break him. He writes 3 names on a card and circles them once. He will not beg for the crown. He will name the game. He gathers proof, trims the story to bone, and chooses what must burn. The city hum becomes a steady drum under his ribs. He stands and puts on the jacket he almost abandoned. Dawn waits at the edges of the glass. Law sits beside him, but it no longer leads. Clarity does. He opens the door and walks toward the fight that needs him. The tower is too quiet, like a stage waiting for a cue. Elevators sigh and stop, and the lights flicker once. James walks the corridor and counts his breaths. Security radios murmur like distant thunder. He feels heat under the collar and ice in his palms. He says, "No more running," and the words steady him. The boardroom door stands open, a bright square in the dark hall. Papers rustle inside, a soft hiss like a fuse. Mark speaks low, then stops when footsteps halt at the threshold. Rachel says, "You should have stayed away." James steps into the light and sets a folder on the table. The silence tightens, then thins to a wire ready to snap. Chairs scrape like blades. Mark says, "Continuity needs control." James answers, "Control without truth is theft." Their voices cut in quick bursts, no room for air. Rachel places a contract between them and says, "You signed the path." James taps the rider and says, "You hid the door." The lights hum louder, as if picking sides. Mark leans in. "You sold a story," he says. James leans closer. "I kept people fed," he says. Rachel's eyes flash, then dim. "Markets do not love you," she says. The folder snaps open, and evidence fans like cards. No one looks away. The room tips toward impact, and the first real blow is about to land. The door opens and Sarah steps in, rain clinging to her coat. She says, "Enough," and sets a drive on the table. Her hands shake, but her voice does not. Mark reaches first. Security moves with him. Sarah looks to James and nods once. "This clears your name," she says. "It stains mine." The room holds a breath that hurts to keep. James whispers, "You don't have to do this." She smiles, small and sad. "Someone does," she says. The guards take her arm when alarms start to sing. The world shrinks to her eyes as she's led away. James understands the price at last, and it burns clean. Richard arrives with lawyers like shadows, and Evelyn follows like weather. The lights buzz, then dim. James says, "Face me, not them." Richard smiles. "I prefer witnesses," he says. Evelyn studies the room and says, "Truth is a scalpel." James steps forward. "Then cut me," he says. Thunder rolls above, and a strip light flickers like fire. Mark slides the vote papers across. Rachel does not touch them. James drops proof on the stack, each page a strike. Richard's grin fades to stone. Evelyn says, "Decide." The storm hits the windows hard. James signs one sheet and tears another in half. The sound is clean. The decision lands. Alarms mute, leaving only rain and breath. The lawyers scatter like birds after a crack. James stands alone at the table's far end. Papers lie still, some whole, some severed. He lets the quiet pour through the breaks. He says, "It ends here," and the room agrees. Richard is gone. Evelyn leaves a look that feels like a seal. Mark stares at his empty hands. Rachel closes her eyes and opens them to a different sky. James gathers what matters and leaves what does not. The door swings once and slows. Outside, the city holds a new shape, and he steps into it. The building rests in a hush that feels earned. Rain has stopped, and the windows hold a pale rinse of dawn. Papers lie where they fell, edges curling like tired breath. James stands at the threshold and listens to the quiet heal. The hum of vents is soft, the clock a slow heartbeat in the wall. He touches the table, and the wood is cool like a fever broken. "It's over," he says, and the room does not argue. He gathers only what matters and leaves the rest to the dust. The stillness shows the shape of the loss more clearly than noise ever could. He knows what is gone, and the knowing finally sinks in. In the hotel room, the silence has weight, but no malice. James sits on the carpet and spreads 3 folders like small gravestones. He thinks of Sarah's brave hands and the choice that burned clean. He hears Mark's voice in the walls, a plan dressed as care. He sees Rachel's look when truth asked for a price. "I let speed decide," he whispers, and the word feels thin. Memory loops in brief flashes, bright and blunt. He holds them all for a count of 10, then lets them pass through. Outside, a bus sighs and moves, and the world does not pause. Life will continue, though it will not be the same shape. A knock lands softly, then waits. Rachel steps in and closes the door with care. Time thins between words like breath on a mirror. "I thought I could balance it," she says, the sentence breaking once. James nods and lets the silence answer first. "We both knew the cost," he finally says, and the room accepts it. Her eyes hold apology and something like relief. The clock ticks and each second feels larger than before. "I'm sorry," she adds, and the echo is kind, not cruel. He says, "I forgive you," and the air changes shape around them. James walks to the bar where Carl once turned truth into a map. The stools are empty, and the glasses wait in neat ranks. He orders water and sets his phone beside it like an oath. A saved voicemail plays, and Carl's voice is warm and worn. "Keep your name, even if you lose your crown," the message says. He smiles once, quick as the words find their home. He ties the old warning to the new road and tests the knot. The past does not bite. It guides. He breathes, and the weight shifts from grief to meaning. A single tear cools his cheek, and the moment holds. Afternoon finds him on the riverwalk with a single envelope. The city breathes easy, and gulls write loose circles in the sky. He mails evidence to the people who will use it well. "Do it right," he writes, and signs only his name. No speeches, no stage, only work that mends what can be mended. He calls Sarah and leaves a message of thanks and care. He closes the ledger inside himself without slamming it shut. The water moves forward, and he chooses to move with it. "Now I understand," he says, and the wind carries it clean. He turns toward what waits next, steady and new. Morning holds the city in a gentle pause. Traffic hums low, respectful. The boardroom sits empty, breathing dust and cool light. James stands by the glass and lets silence finish the argument. Torn pages lie flat now, like tides at rest. He counts losses without numbers, only weight. The air is clear of alarms, and the clock ticks like a slow stitch. He whispers thank you to no one, then to everyone. The room answers with calm, not comfort. What remains is smaller, cleaner, harder to break. He touches the table once, and the echo is soft. In the quiet, a question opens its hand. Was it worth it? He empties the office with careful hands. One box, one coat, one breath. He deletes a number he once called first, then last. The elevator descends in a hush that feels kind. Outside, gulls stitch the sky with slow arcs. He walks the river path and lets the wind file the edges. He says enough, and the word lands without echo. Footsteps find a steadier rhythm, no chase behind them. The city exhales and keeps moving. He does not look back at the tower. The water carries a small reflection forward, unafraid. Departure is not escape. It is acceptance. At the hotel desk, a phone light blinks like a heartbeat. He presses play and lets the room dim around the voice. Carl speaks in warm gravel, a letter from before the storm. "Keep your name," the voice says. Even when crowns roll, the words move slowly, careful not to bruise. He sees Sarah at the threshold again, brave and shaking. He sees Rachel looking up, asking for a future with her eyes. The voice fades, but leaves the shape of it behind. He breathes in and out until the ache fits his chest. The theme returns, patient and clear. What we sign becomes us. Days widen. Headlines shift to new storms. In the lobby of a different tower, interns laugh at the wrong time and learn from it. A trader hums a tune that no one knows yet. Rachel signs a modest lease and chooses quieter furniture. Mark sits in a smaller room and hears his own words come back thinner. James drinks water, not victory. He says thank you to the morning and means it. Time moves with a human gait again. No crescendo, only pulse. The narrator's voice softens with the light. Change has settled in. It will not leave. At sunrise on the river, the water is a page without edits. He folds one last letter and does not send it. He pockets the truth like a compass, not a trophy. Breath in, breath out. He looks at the city and chooses to build nothing that requires worship. A small smile, almost private, finds him. He speaks once for himself alone. Let the work be honest. The wind carries it, light and certain. Then silence, full and clean. Truth must never be owned.